What's going on, everybody? So we are en route to hang out with a guy that, in my book, is probably one of the more legendary people in this world. He set a multitude of records back in the late 50s, early 60s, and in fact, he was famous enough that he made the cover of Life magazine in 1960. So his name's Joe Kittinger. Some of you might recognize him, some of you might not. So here's a little intro about who this guy is and what he's about. He originally flew P-51s at the end of World War II, and then went and flew P-47s as well, and a multitude of other aircraft. He then went to become a test pilot while in the Air Force, flew the very first jet prototypes, and from there transgressed to a project known as Manhigh, or also known as Excelsior. The goal of this project was to take a human to the edge of space, and at that time their only way was to do it, this was pre-rockets and NASA, was by a balloon. Crazy enough to think about. So Joe essentially took a balloon, and his final record set at 108,000 feet, and then, if that's not crazy enough, parachuted from this balloon at the edge of space back to Earth. During that, he had hit the sound barrier, almost reaching the sound barrier. I think his free fall speed was around 600 miles an hour. Wow. Which can't even fathom that. And the temperatures ranged from, I think, negative 90, and the point of this whole test was to see if humans could sustain life at high speed ejections, high altitude ejections, and preliminary tests in the early space program. So Joe was, I would think, is the early godfather of high altitude pressure suits, temperatures, testing, and then free falling. If an astronaut had to bail out and whatnot. So this guy definitely paved the way of developments and space exploration, and you know, his best friends were like John Glenn and Neil Armstrong and all these other legendary people. So he's 93 years old, 94 years old, right? And 93, yeah. And I was on the phone with him. How this all became of is he's always been kind of an idol of mine. I've always liked this guy. He's got an incredible book. If you like reading, check out Come Up and Get Me. And her and I are gonna try to attempt the altitude record for paramotors, which is very minuscule to what this guy has done. But he was kind of like this role model for me. And I went down this rabbit hole and I found this email address when I was reading up about him. And I emailed this email address a while back, and I'm like, there's no way this guy's gonna reply back to me. Sure as heck, he did. And so him and I have stayed in touch. Her parents live in St. Pete, and we're just on our way up to meet Joe, who also, by coincidence, lives not too far from her parents. And so now we're gonna go have lunch and hang out with this guy. So I figured if you like history, Air Force history, and just a total, excuse my French, a badass, this guy fits all three criteria points. So enjoy this episode, and I'm excited to meet this gentleman.
Legend.
Yeah. Woo! Mustache. Okay. But thank you for meeting me today. This is Joe Kittinger, and he's a legend amongst any aviation enthusiasts in general. And he took the time today to hang out with me. And one of the planes he actually flew is behind us, the glorious F-4 Phantom. And he actually flew this specific airplane in
4 combat missions.
4 combat missions. And the fact that it's here with us, I mean, that's got to be pretty sentimental.
It is. It's very sentimental. I also flew the airplane on England when it got transferred after the war. So this airplane's an old friend of mine.
That's incredible. Now, if we were to back the story way up, you originally started flying towards the end of World War II. Like, yes. And the first platform you flew was what, the P-47?
In the Air Force.
In the Air Force.
No, the first airplane was a T-6.
T-6 Texan.
then the P-51,
Okay.
and then the P-47.
Then the P-47.
Yeah.
And out of those airframes, you're a big fan of the P-51 from what I
My
hear.
favorite prop-driven airplane is the P-51.
P-51.
My favorite jet is the F-4.
The F-4 Phantom.
And by the way, I've flown 93 different airplanes,
93.
and I have 17,000 hours of flying. So
93 airplanes, 17,000 hours of flying airplanes, and that's in 93. What was out of all those airframes, what was the worst that you remember flying?
well, they're all beautiful. I love every airplane.
Yeah,
I would never criticize any airplane
true.
because they give you adventure.
Yeah,
They give you an opportunity to see the world in a different perspective.
absolutely.
And every airplane is interesting.
And was there one that, I mean, the F-4 Phantom for you was, you said your absolute favorite from the jet-wise, prop-wise, the P-51. And if you look back at all those years of flying, is there, out of, let's say, 5 memories, is there one that really sticks with you and like, that was an incredible time?
Well, this airplane.
This one right here, the F-4.
I also shot down a MiG-21
Oh my
in
gosh.
Vietnam. So I had 3 tours of Vietnam.
Okay.
And this monument is dedicated to the Vietnam veterans of Central Florida.
Unbelievable. And in Vietnam, you know, the MiG-21, that was a pretty fast airplane.
It was Mach 2.
Mach 2. And
Like this airplane's Mach 2.1.
so, I mean, the competition level with aerial dogfighting, where did you feel that the Vietnamese were pretty formidable pilots when air-to-air engagement?
They were,
Yeah,
but not as good as the F-4.
not as good as the F-4.
F-4 was a better airplane.
It was,
And we were better pilots.
more training and everything, huh? Yeah. And when you take a step back, a big moment in your life was essentially doing the edge of space jump. And, you know, to give the audience some perspective, the highest altitude that you had jumped from was
103,000.
103,000 feet.
I worked 12 years on the research for space. I made 5 balloon flights to the stratosphere, gathering information we needed for the space program. I made a jump from 103,000 feet to come up with escape systems at very high altitude. So I spent 12 years doing research for aviators and space. And then I spent 17 years as a fighter pilot.
17 years. You know, when you're sitting in that gondola and you're at that 103,000 feet, did you get a few moments to just take in everything that was around you? And do you still remember like the...
I did, Nathan. I spent 11 minutes at altitude floating.
Just sitting up there.
Just sitting, waiting to get into position. And I looked out at the horizon and above there, and I was mesmerized by the sight that was there. It was a fantastic sight. Now, space is hostile.
Yeah.
You have to have a special suit. It's very cold. There's radiation. It's a very hostile environment. But it's beautiful to be there and look out at the Earth from that altitude, 20 miles up.
20 miles. And you had left that gondola. You made the decision to jump. And at that time, you did not know you had an issue with your pressure suit.
Yeah.
And you had jumped, and you're mentioning that it was almost, there wasn't a lot of wind noise, not what you'd expect.
There's no window because you're in a vacuum. You're at 99% above 99% of the atmosphere of the Earth.
So it's a vacuum.
It's a vacuum.
Oh my gosh.
It's a vacuum. You know, the pressure here is about 720 millibars.
Yeah.
At 103,000 feet, it's 5 millibars.
Wow.
It's the same atmosphere that's on Mars.
And you had left this gondola, and
So when I left the gondola, it was a vacuum. And I accelerated to a speed of 614 miles an hour.
614.
But you have no way of knowing it because there's no perception. The way you perceive velocity is perception.
Yeah.
When you're at 20 miles above, you have no idea.
No clue.
No idea. And Felix Baumgartner jumped, he went supersonic. And he had no idea he was supersonic. Because it happened in a vacuum.
And at what point did you start hearing wind and actual?
Well, you don't hear the wind because you have a pressure suit.
Yeah.
Coming along.
You don't hear nothing.
But you feel it at about 50,000 feet. You start really feeling the atmosphere.
At 50,000 feet. I can't imagine, like, you know, airliners, 30,000 seems high. And you were coming through the atmosphere, and I was reading about, you know, the parachute system, and that it was, what is a three-stage parachute? You had your drogue chute, and then it was stabilization chute.
And then that main parachute opened at altitude. Now, here's the interesting thing, Nathan. That system we developed in 1959, 1960 is still being used today.
To this day.
Every ejection seat in the world uses a stabilization chute for high altitude ejection.
That is incredible.
So what we did then is still being used today, which makes us very happy because we're saving pilots' lives.
And for it to transgress this far and still be
yes.
Martin Baker, all those guys, just that's pretty fascinating. Your book, the details about it, how everything that was also fascinating to me because, you know, the stuff that you guys went through, the trials and tribulations. I remember you had that balloon manufacturer that they took forever, and they weren't producing the balloons that you I think you had the issue where it was jettisoning before, you know, and was that gondola would just separate from the balloon?
Yeah, after I jumped, about 10 minutes after I got on the ground, they would send a signal to the balloon, cut away from the balloon, a parachute would open, bring the gondola down. We used the same gondola 3 times.
Okay. And it would just separate. And what would happen to that balloon? It would
blow up.
It'd blow up. Because
it's brittle. It's 30 degrees below zero.
Unbelievable.
So this plastic is brittle. So when it releases that load, it blows up.
Wow. Do you, if you look back at that whole project, and you were to grab one memory that has still stuck with you today, what is one of those memories?
The free fall.
The free fall.
And the jubilation that our team had on the ground after we worked 1.5 years for this.
Yeah.
We were successful. I was still alive, and we had a great celebration. The team members, because in order to do a project like this, Nathan, it takes 3 things. First of all, you have to have confidence in your equipment.
Yeah.
That's confidence in your team and confidence in yourself. It takes all 3 of them
to make that work.
If one of them's missing, you can't do it.
Wow.
I had a great team of people working for me and with me for that goal. So that was a lot of fun on the ground after the jump.
And after that whole project, then you went back to flying. You were flying F4s.
A couple years later, yes.
A couple years later, and Vietnam was starting to get heated up.
Yes.
And going over there, with the F4 Phantom, MiG-21 was the biggest adversary against you. Right?
It was.
And so you had shot down a MiG-21.
Yes.
And what was that like? I mean, were you flying and you saw him and you're engaging with him? What?
We had a fight, and I beat him.
And you beat him.
Yeah. But then, a year later, I was leading a MiG camp over North Vietnam.
Okay.
And the world's greatest fighter pilot on the other side shot me down.
Really?
And I spent a year as a POW in Hanoi.
And that was probably pretty rough.
So that was a terrible year.
What, the guy that got you, did he get you by a missile or guns?
A missile.
A missile.
Air missile.
And did you have warning systems? Are you like you're being engaged by a missile?
Well, he came straight up. I was getting ready to shoot down another MiG. I was chasing a MiG.
Wow.
And he came straight up, and I never saw him.
He just came out of nowhere.
And the missile came out of nowhere. I did not fight him. He pulled straight up and fired his missile.
And it hit you straight underneath?
And it hit me straight. It destroyed the airplane.
And you knew the minute did you eject upon impact, or did you?
No, I was doing Mach 2.
Mach 2? When
I got hit.
Oh my God.
And I was about 25,000 feet.
And that came up.
I ended up ejecting at Mach 1 at 18,000 feet.
mean, because at 18,000 feet, there's a decent amount of wind and resistance.
Well, here's the thing, though. The density is half an atmosphere. So when you eject at altitude, you don't have that wind blast. If you eject at Mach 1 at sea level, it's tremendous air blast. But at 18,000 feet,
it wasn't as bad.
It's not bad.
But early ejection seats were still pretty violent. I mean, do you remember
But it's a good violence because it's getting you to safety.
Yeah, I get that. And your chute, so you ejected, your chute opened up, and then at that moment when you're under canopy, where you're like, this isn't good.
This is going to be a bad day.
This is going to be a bad day.
I was 30 miles west of Hanoi, so I was very close to Hanoi when I got shot down.
Wow. And you had landed, and what was
I was immediately captured.
Immediately. They could see you from when you're on your way down.
Immediately captured.
Wow.
I ejected over a rice field, and there was about 100 people working in the rice field. And as soon as I landed, there was 100 people around me.
And that was it?
That was it.
Were they somewhat friendly at all, or were they?
No, they were hostile.
Super hostile.
A woman about 90 years old took a machete and took a swipe at my neck.
Oh.
And then a kid about 12 years old did the same thing. I almost was killed twice within the first minute I was on the ground.
Oh my God. And
they're very hostile.
They didn't.
And for,
Yeah, I get both sides.
War.
Yeah. And over the years, so you spent a year in a prisoner of war camp at the Hanoi Hilton.
Yeah.
And I know that in the book you're saying that the torture methods are pretty bad. And, you finally got released out of there. What was the feeling? When did you know that you were going to get released? Did you know?
About a week ahead.
A week ahead.
And the happiest day of my life.
Wow.
To be released as a POW. Back to our wonderful country.
Yeah. America's kind of hard to beat.
Hard to beat.
It's hard to beat.
People criticize our country, but they still stay here. If they didn't like it, they should leave.
I'm 100% on board with you. I have a very big admiration for our country, and every day I wake up, I'm just like, I'm so lucky to be here.
They criticize the country, but they still stay here.
I know.
So it can't be that bad.
No, I would agree with that. When you came back to America, did you do? One second, the audio's gonna pick up the dang airplane. Not that I complain. I love airplanes. Yeah. Did you when you came back, and you just spent a year in Vietnam? Did you want to keep flying? Did you want?
Oh yeah.
You want to get right back in that seat?
I was right back in the Air Force. The POWs were treated wonderfully by our country.
Yeah.
The Vietnam veterans that came back were treated horribly.
Wow.
Horribly. They had to take their uniforms off. People spit on them. It was a horrible, horrible reception our Vietnam veterans got coming back from the war.
That's sad.
And that's one of the reasons why this monument is here. Because I wanted to make tribute to those Vietnam veterans.
Absolutely.
Because they were treated horribly when they came back.
I don't understand the demographics behind that. Those guys gave so much.
Well, one of the reasons was, Nathan, is that it was the politicians' fault.
Yeah.
They did not declare war. They should have declared war and given the reins to the military to end it up. We could have ended that war immediately.
Yeah, I get that.
But it was run by politicians. The American people took it out on the Vietnam veterans, and all they were doing was doing what they were told to do, what their commander told them to do. So it was a tragic thing that happened.
Yeah.
Fortunately, our country's learned since then, and the veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan were treated wonderfully well, as they should be, because they were representing our country. But we lost 58,000 people in Vietnam.
So sad.
American women, men and women died in Vietnam. Probably in Iraq and Afghanistan, we may have lost 4,000. We lost 58,000 Americans in that war.
That's so sad. And it shouldn't never happen.
There were over 2 million servicemen and women served in Vietnam. 2 million served in Vietnam.
When you go back to when you were flying the F-4 and that MiG-21 pilot, Do you ever know what the whereabouts of that pilot that shot you down?
No.
No.
No. And when I was in Vietnam at the end of the war,
yeah,
a couple of days before I was released, they brought me into a room.
Yeah.
And they had a camera there. And I said, wow. And a whole bunch of people. And the interrogator said, this man here was the pilot that shot you down. Anybody can say that.
Yeah.
Anybody can say that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I said, would you describe the air battle? So he described it, and they translated it. And he described it, they translated it. It wasn't anywhere near.
It was nothing. Really?
I said to them, this man is a fraud. They did not understand fraud. The interpreter, he did not know the word. So he left the room, went to a dictionary, came back, and told them what I said, and they all walked out of the room. Because they were there for propaganda purposes. But the guy was a fake.
And you knew right off the bat.
I knew right off the bat. When I asked him to describe the battle, it was completely different. But the Vietnamese learned what fraud meant.
They finally had to go back in the dictionary?
They finally discovered what fraud meant.
That's incredible. And you dedicated this park. So this whole park is the Joe Kittinger Park.
Yes. And the city named it after me.
That's so neat.
I had no idea they were going to do it. But it's a memorial to Vietnam veterans. And it's also a place where kids can come and watch airplanes. That pagoda behind there has a radio that they hear the conversation between the tower and the airplanes.
Oh, I'm going to have to go hang over there.
When I was a boy, I used to ride my bicycle out here to this airfield and watch airplanes. This was my field of dreams. When I was a boy.
You were at this field?
This action field.
What year was that?
Oh, this is back in the 40s. This airfield was built in 1927.
And it's still operating?
Still operating.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And when I came back from the war, there was no place where a kid could go and watch airplanes. So that's why I had this park built so kids could come here like I did. This was my field of dreams. This is where I set my goal to be an aviator. Was right here. And I wanted to give the present kids the same opportunity to watch airplanes. So that's why that radio's out there, and that pagoda's out there, and that playground's there for kids. Man. In the summertime, this place is full of kids.
That has got to be the best feeling.
It is a wonderful feeling because I'm contributing to the future.
I mean, you guarantee there's a kid there that because he listened to that phone and heard the radio tower, he's like, I want to fly.
Well, they didn't have radio when I was here. When I was a kid.
You just watched.
Yeah. Just watched.
That's amazing. I got to catch up with you. And oh man, you look good. You look like he's the real deal. So he earned that. And this monument and everything that you did with this park, and I just had to hear like your stories and everything about it. You know, your life's journey has just been incredibly fascinating.
Thank you, Dave.
And the fact that you're still here after all the things that you went through. I mean, flying a P-51 in itself is a challenge, and then you survived that. You survived the high altitude edge of space balloon jump, and then survived ejecting out of an F4.
I had 2 ejections.
2 ejections.
Yeah.
Out of all the years, you've had 2 ejections. Was it out of an F4 or?
No, an F100.
F100. I mean, to survive.
At 800 feet.
Is it true that you get an inch shorter after every ejection?
You get a what?
You get an inch shorter because of the compression?
No.
No.
That's a rumor.
A rumor. I've heard that. I was like, that terrifies me.
That's not so.
Well, thank you so much, and for taking the time for this. And
you were well prepared, Nathan. It's a delight talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that. And this is Joe Kittinger here for you, the legend, the man, the myth. I flipped that around in the wrong way, but he's here, and thanks for watching. Well, I just had the greatest Saturday ever. I had an opportunity to hang with one of the most legendary aviators ever, and I had lunch with the guy. I hung out with him. Joe Kittinger is probably the coolest veteran / test pilot I have ever met. And, you know, they always say, never meet your heroes. And I actually disagree with that, because almost every person that I've idolized since I was little has been amazing in person. And this guy was better than I expected to hang out with. He was just, you wouldn't believe the stories that he had. And unfortunately, I wish I recorded in the video some of his other adventures. You know, the problem is we had it compressed so tight when we were at the park, and he was hungry, I was hungry, everybody was, so we went out and had lunch. But while we were having lunch, I forgot to mention that, you know, Joe's also famous for flying a hot air balloon across the Atlantic solo, and he set that record. Him and his wife are also crazy adventuristic type couple, because they've done stuff such flying hot air balloons across Australia, and you know, the guy's just got stories, drinking beers with Neil Armstrong, and they were best buddies, and just he's one of the guys that I would definitely put in the category of the right stuff. And hanging out with him today really established how great of a human he is, and just from record setting to as well as just being in person, he's really personable, and I didn't want the day to end. And we finished it off by flying with the squadron commander down here at MacDill Air Force Base. He's got a Cardinal, and it's like a fancier version of a Cessna 172, and it's an incredible aircraft, and he took us flying around by Disney World in that area, and so I'll post up that video too. So very action-packed day, and very hard to beat. I don't think I'm going to top this one out for a while, and now we're headed home and to her parents' place.
Yay!
Yes, and probably going to relax because we've been up for quite a while. So thanks for watching this episode. Hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll release the next episode. Thanks.